Chapter 131. That night, Joshua returned to the dorm looking miserable, though he didn't say what was bothering him. Meanwhile, Isaac was on the phone, arguing with Miranda over the concert tickets. She was furious that he couldn't afford them, but Isaac was just a college student. How was he supposed to drop that kind of money on tickets? After lights out, the guys started chatting about the biggest topic on campus, the upcoming celebrity concert. Joshua and Isaac, however, were too busy cursing out Soul, blaming him for the insane ticket prices. "If I ever run into him," Isaac declared, "I swear I'd knock him out. This guy ruined everything." Earl glanced at Isaac, instinctively touching his own head. Would he be able to survive Isaac's knockout punch when the truth came out? Luca had been staying off campus lately, renting a place to focus on his music and upcoming gigs, so he barely returned to the dorm anymore. As for Miranda, she had stopped nagging Joshua for tickets. But that was even worse because it meant she had somehow gotten them herself, and knowing Miranda, Joshua couldn't help but suspect the cost had been more than just money. At some point, Isaac turned to Samuel to remind him to keep an eye on Jenna. He heard she had been hanging out with her ex again. Samuel barely reacted. He just gave a vague, uninterested nod. The next morning, Earl had no classes, so he got up and spent the time working on his game. A great game needed a compelling story, and he was deep into drafting the world building and lore for his next big project. When Isaac, Joshua, and Ronnie left the dorm, Samuel suddenly walked over to Earl, hesitating as if he wanted to say something but wasn't sure how. After a long pause, he finally blurted out, "Hey, do you have any extra cash? Can you lend me some?" Earl had assumed Samuel had blown all his money chasing after Jenna. So, he asked, "What do you need it for?" If it was just another case of a guy wasting money on a girl who didn't care about him, Earl wasn't going to enable that. At most, he'd make sure Samuel didn't starve. But to Earl's surprise, Samuel's eyes reddened slightly before he forced a weak smile. "It's nothing. My parents want to visit for a couple of days. I just want to show them a good time." Since it wasn't about being a desperate simp, Earl had no issue with it. "How much do you need?" Samuel awkwardly held up 2 fingers. $2,000. If that's too much, even 1,000, or 500 would help. Earl pulled out his phone and said, "Send me your Venmo account." Samuel nodded and reached for his phone. But a folded piece of paper slipped out as he pulled it from his pocket. Earl caught a glimpse of it and instantly recognized it. His gaze sharpened when he realized it was a hospital bill. "You sold your blood." His tone was sharp. "Sam, what the hell is going on?" That was the final straw. Samuel broke down. Tears welled up in his eyes as his voice cracked. "Earl, my dad's in the hospital. He just got transferred to Alnewgo for treatment. He's in the final stage of pancreatic cancer." He swallowed hard, his whole body shaking. Earl froze. Pancreatic cancer was one of the deadliest forms of cancer. No wonder Samuel had been so out of it lately. It all made sense now. Without a second thought, Earl pulled up his account balance. After covering his own expenses, he had about $8,000 left. Without hesitation, he sent all of it to Samuel. "Take it," Earl said. "If you need more, just ask me." Sam's eyes widened in shock when he saw the amount. "Earl, this is too much money. There's no hope for my dad. I just wanted to make his last days good. We won't even be able to spend this much. More than that." Samuel was terrified he wouldn't be able to pay Earl back. Earl frowned. "This isn't for you. It's for your dad." He crossed his arms. "And what the hell are you gonna do in Alnewgo with just $2,000? Chapter 132. In the end, Samuel left with heartfelt gratitude. Earl, on the other hand, now had exactly $50 left in his account, along with some cafeteria meal credits. Eating wasn't a problem, but with Bianca's birthday coming up, what kind of gift could he even afford? Still, he had no regrets. If he had more money, he'd have given Samuel even more. He couldn't imagine what Samuel's family would go through after losing his father. Around noon, Earl got a call from Belle, asking him to grab lunch. Her dad, Philip Cole, was coming to visit that evening, and she wanted to go over a few things so they could fake it convincingly. When Earl came downstairs, Belle was already waiting by the dorm entrance. They walked to a cozy little restaurant, and she ordered a few of his favorite dishes. But throughout the meal, she kept throwing sarcastic jabs at him. Earl finally put his cutleries down and asked, "Belle, what's with the attitude? I don't remember pissing you off." Belle scoffed and shot him an annoyed glare. "You seriously don't know?" Earl raised an eyebrow. "I have no idea." Belle crossed her arms and huffed. "You've been too busy drowning in your little love bubble, playing perfect couple with a certain radio station princess." Earl blinked, caught off guard. "How do you even know about that?" He hadn't told anyone he was working at the station. Belle smirked coldly. "What, do you think I'm deaf? Did you think I wouldn't recognize your voice?" Not to mention, when she had heard Timeless Years the other day, she had instantly known who was playing the guitar. Nobody else could play like that, let alone match Bianca's piano playing so flawlessly. The chemistry in that duet had been enough to upset her. Earl tried to explain, but Belle wasn't having it. When the food arrived, she stubbornly refused to talk to him, pouting in silence. Earl, deciding her tantrum wasn't worth the effort, just focused on his meal. Seeing that he didn't even bother to defend himself, Belle got even more frustrated. So, in a spur-of-the-moment impulse, she slipped off her shoe and kicked him under the table. Earl, caught off guard, flinched from the sudden pinch on his foot. Reflexively, he reached down to grab whatever had just attacked him and ended up holding something warm, soft, and surprisingly smooth. He looked down a second and realized he was holding Belle's foot. Her delicate, fair-skinned toes curled slightly under his touch, a striking contrast to the red polish on her nails. His gaze flicked back up, meeting Belle's flushed face. She looked like she had not expected him to actually grab her. Her expression was a mix of embarrassment, irritation, and something else, something softer, something Earl couldn't quite put his finger on. Belle quickly tried to pull away, mumbling, "Let go." But Earl smirked, tightening his grip slightly. "Oh, so, you can mess with me, but I'm not allowed to fight back." He expected her to snap back, to yank her foot away and call him a jerk. But instead, Belle's face turned a deep shade of pink. She bit her lip and lowered her gaze as she muttered softly, "Whatever. Do whatever you want." She didn't pull away and just let him hold her foot. Earl suddenly found himself at a loss. What was this? He had expected Belle to get mad, maybe even kick him harder. But instead, she was just sitting there, flushed and still, letting him hold onto her like she wanted him to. Meanwhile, Belle's thoughts were in complete chaos. A woman's feet were usually one of the most sensitive parts of her body, and yet, when Earl touched her, she didn't feel uncomfortable at all. In fact, it felt kind of nice. A quiet thought crept into her mind. She would just let him hold her feet if he liked. It wasn't a big deal, anyway. Chapter 133. Belle told herself that she had already kissed Earl, so letting him hold her foot like this wasn't a big deal. But another voice in the back of her mind whispered, if she let him do this so easily, would he think she's too easy? Would he start looking down on her? Just as she hesitated, something in the corner of her eye caught her attention. A man and a woman had just walked into the restaurant. The guy was tall and handsome. And the woman was Bianca. Belle's lips curled into a teasing smirk. A moment later, the two walked right past their table. Earl, who had his back to the entrance, finally noticed Bianca. His body tensed slightly, and though he kept a neutral expression, a faint trace of disappointment flashed in his eyes. Bianca, however, didn't see him. She was too focused on chatting and laughing with the guy next to her. In seconds, they had walked past and taken a seat further inside. Earl kept his face impassive, pretending not to care. But Belle saw right through him. Grinning mischievously, she leaned in. "Earl, did you see who just walked by? Alnewgo University's goddess, Bianca. Why don't you go say hi?" Earl shrugged. "Oh, I didn't notice." Belle snorted. "Sure you didn't." Then, she tilted her head toward Bianca's companion. "Who's that guy? It looks like he's just stolen our campus queen." Earl frowned. They're just having a meal. Don't be dramatic. But even as he said it, his voice had a slight hesitation. He knew the guy. It was Leslie. He was the same guy who had picked Bianca up in his Mercedes. Earl had heard plenty of rumors about him. Wealthy, powerful, the heir to a massive business empire. If anyone had a shot at winning over Bianca, it was a guy like that. Belle smirked. Oh, so it does bother you. Earl said nothing. Belle was thoroughly enjoying this. She muttered under her breath, saying Earl deserved this. He was always messing with Bianca. It was great for him to feel the feeling of getting played by someone else. Seeing Earl stew in silence, she took it one step further. This restaurant has private rooms, you know. It's mostly for couples. She arched a brow. Why else would they come here? Earl's expression darkened. Belle felt victorious, until she suddenly realized something. If this place was for couples, then didn't this make them a couple, too? She stole a glance at Earl. But he didn't react. Belle felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. Their teasing banter lost momentum, and both of them just focused on eating, suddenly in a sour mood. After lunch, Belle told Earl to come to her dorm to pick something up. When she returned, she handed him a shopping bag. Put these on, she said. My dad's coming tonight, and I don't want him seeing you dressed like a slob. Inside the bag were the outfits they had picked out during their mall trip. Earl had tossed them aside before, but Belle had secretly retrieved and ironed them, just in case. And today, it finally came in handy. Earl frowned. Clothes aren't about price, they just need to be clean and presentable. Belle pouted, her voice softening into a playful whine. Please, Earl, I really don't want my dad to think my boyfriend has no fashion sense. Earl sighed in defeat. Grabbing the bag, he headed back to his dorm to change. Belle grinned and followed after him, practically bouncing with excitement. When Earl stepped out again, dressed in the sleek, fitted outfit she had picked, he looked completely different. Chapter 134. Earl had worn this outfit once before, but seeing him in it again still made Belle pause for a moment. He stood tall, looking effortlessly sharp. Her heart thumped hard against her chest, but she quickly covered it up with a casual shrug. All right, I guess you won't embarrass me too much. In reality, she loved the way he looked in it. Earl smirked. That's good enough for me. I guess I'll wear this when I meet your dad. Belle nodded. Yeah, I'll text you when he gets here. With that settled, she left, and Earl got back to work. He sat down at his desk, booted up his computer, and immersed himself in programming, fine-tuning the mechanics for his latest game project. Hours passed without him realizing it. By the time his eyes started to ache from staring at the screen, he finally leaned back, stretched his arms, and checked his phone. It was already 5 p.m. He reached for his phone to call Belle, only to brush against something soft accidentally. Startled, he turned to Belle, who was still there. You haven't left yet? Earl asked, surprised. Belle quickly looked away, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. My dad should be here soon. If you're done, we should probably head out. She had thought about leaving earlier, but for some reason, she had stayed. Lately, she just wanted to be around Earl, even if they weren't doing anything. Just sitting there, watching him work, felt oddly comforting. Right then, her phone rang. A deep voice rumbled from the other end. After she hung up, she turned to Earl. He's here. Let's go. Earl straightened his clothes and followed her out. The moment they stepped outside, Belle casually slipped her arm through his, then rested her head against his shoulder. A faint, sweet fragrance lingered around her, making Earl hesitate. Isn't this a little too close? Belle lifted her gaze, her eyes shimmering with playful defiance. What, are you scared? We need to practice. What if we mess up in front of my dad? Then she smirked. Besides, we've already kissed. Holding hands is nothing. Earl knew there was no winning against her, so he just let her be and walked along with her. When they arrived at the restaurant's private dining room, Earl pushed the door open and froze. Inside was an elderly figure with long, graying hair and surprisingly thick eyebrows. For a second, Earl was completely confused. Did they walk into the wrong room? Philip's features were deeply lined, and the heavy hair growth made Earl instinctively assume that he was an old lady. Trying to be polite, he hesitated before asking, ma'am, do you know where room 1068 is? Philip's expression darkened. This is 1068. Why? Earl blinked. He had to have made a mistake. No woman wanted to be mistaken for a grandmother, so he quickly corrected himself. My bad, miss, I must have walked into the wrong place. What? Philip's face twisted into something even more offended. Earl swallowed. Miss. The room fell into absolute silence. Then, in a deep, irritated voice, Philip finally clarified, I'm her dad. Belle, who had just walked in, instantly turned red with rage. She glared at Earl. What the hell are you saying? That's my dad. Chapter 135. Earl was surprised to find out that this man, who looked so much like he was from an earlier generation, was actually Belle's father. Forcing out a laugh, Earl quickly tried to save himself. Of course, I knew that. Mr. Cole, you look so young. And your hairstyle is so unique and stylish. Clearly, you're a man of great taste and experience. He cleared his throat, then added, It's nice to meet you, Mr. Cole. Philip was a big-hearted man with a hearty laugh. He didn't seem to mind Earl's slip-up and gestured for him to sit down. As they settled in, the conversation flowed effortlessly. From cigars to painting, from hobbies to life goals, the more they talked, the more comfortable they became. At one point, Philip pulled out a cigarette and asked, Do you smoke? Earl wasn't a smoker, but seeing the rough calluses on Philip's fingers, clearly, he had years of experience with tobacco, he knew what the right answer was. Once in a while, Earl said smoothly. Philip nodded approvingly and handed him a cigarette. Here, try mine. Earl respectfully took it. Mr. Cole, I'm sure this is the good stuff. Across the table, Belle rolled her eyes. She thought Earl was such a bootlicker. The food arrived, and the conversation only got livelier. Philip and Earl went back and forth, toasting drinks, exchanging stories, and bonding over their shared interests. Earl would raise his glass, Philip would offer him another cigarette. Philip would take a sip, Earl would light up another toast. Before long, they were completely in sync, laughing like old friends. By the time dinner was halfway through, they were practically brothers, arms slung around each other's shoulders, laughing and enjoying the moment. As they chatted, the conversation shifted to painting. Philip suggested he paint something on the spot. With a flourish, he painted a dragon and phoenix, then turned to Earl with a confident grin. So, what do you think, Earl? Pretty impressive, right? Doesn't it look so lively? Earl and Belle both stared at the paper. Their expressions were complicated, to say the least. Earl's inner thoughts were screaming. Was that supposed to be a dragon and phoenix? He had seen better drawing skills from kindergarteners. If Earl had just picked up a pencil, his drawing would probably have been better than Philip's. But Philip was sitting there with the proudest look on his face, clearly expecting praise. Earl wiped the sweat off his forehead. This was going to require serious bootlicking skills. With a straight face, he lifted his thumb and declared, Amazing. Truly amazing. The depth, the energy, your painting has a certain soul to it. Honestly, only some world-class artist would be able to match your skill. Philip practically glowed at the compliment. He laughed humbly, though his whole posture screamed smug satisfaction. Oh, come now, comparing me to some world-class artist. I wouldn't dare, though. Although they might only be slightly better than me. Earl fought back a grimace. Philip had no shame. Just when he thought he was finally in the clear, Philip grinned and handed him the brush. All right, Earl, let's see what you've got. Draw something for me, and I'll personally evaluate it. Chapter 136. That was great. Philip was hooked. Earl had thrown out a few compliments, and now Philip was drunk on praise, actually thinking he could give him pointers. This put Earl in a tough spot. If he drew too well, he'd overshadow Philip. If he drew too poorly, Philip might start looking down on him. After a moment of thought, Earl decided to keep it casual, good enough to be respectable but not so good that it made Philip look bad. Yet even with that mindset, his natural skill in painting still shone through. He smoothly brushed the words, You have great painting skills, Mr. Cole, with a rough sketch of his face onto the paper. Belle's eyes flickered with surprise. Even she hadn't expected Earl to have such skills. Philip studied the words for a moment before nodding approvingly. It's not too bad. Of course, you're still a bit behind me, but you've got potential. Earl immediately played along. Of course. My skills are nowhere near yours, Mr. Cole. Your writing is on par with the greatest artists in the world. I can only dream of reaching such heights. Philip beamed, his ego soaring to dangerous levels. Well, I wouldn't go that far. But, you know, I wouldn't mind coming behind them. Maybe someone I could even give you some advice on improving. Sure, Mr. Cole, Earl thanked Philip. The atmosphere was warm and friendly as the two of them exchanged drinks. Even Belle blushed from the flattery. Philip was very pleased with Earl's performance. He was a little tipsy as he patted Earl on the shoulder and said, Earl, you really know how to impress people. I've decided you're a keeper. As far as I'm concerned, you've passed the test. But there's still one more hurdle, Belle's mom. You'd better be prepared. Earl quickly nodded, but he found it a bit strange. Why weren't both of Belle's parents involved in the evaluation? The next day was Bianca's birthday. Early in the morning, she called Earl to arrange to meet at a hotel by the campus lake for lunch to celebrate. Later that evening, Earl was also expected at the Irene Music Academy for a star-studded concert performance. The tickets had sold out almost immediately since news of Soul's appearance at the concert broke. The general manager of Starlight Entertainment, Felix, had also called early to urge Earl to get to the venue for preparation. Once Soul's performance went smoothly, the stock price of Starlight Entertainment was sure to skyrocket. However, Earl declined, saying he had something to attend to and wouldn't be able to report to the company until the afternoon. Though Felix was slightly displeased, he didn't dare to offend Earl. After all, Earl was now the golden goose of Starlight Entertainment. After sending Felix off, Earl was once again in a dilemma. Thinking about Bianca's birthday, he knew he had to prepare a gift. But when he checked his balance, he found he only had $80 left. With that little money, buying a decent gift for Bianca seemed impossible. Even a gift from an ordinary friend would seem too stingy, let alone for someone who held a special place in Earl's heart like Bianca. But that was all the money he had left. After thinking it over, Earl decided to call Patrick to see if he could borrow some money. Patrick agreed immediately, offering him a loan of $10,000 without hesitation. Even though Drakengard Games was going through financial struggles, Patrick figured that as CEO, Earl shouldn't be walking around broke. With cash in hand, Earl finally felt a little more at ease. But when he returned to the dorm, he was met with a suffocating cloud of cigarette smoke. Samuel sat hunched on the floor, chain smoking. Empty beer bottles were scattered everywhere. His face was streaked with dried tears, and he looked like a man who had completely given up on life. Earl frowned and walked over, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. Come on, he said. You're drinking alone? That's pathetic. Chapter 137. As soon as Earl walked in, Samuel struggled to his feet. His voice was weak, but his tone was firm. There's something I need to ask you. Go ahead, Earl said. Samuel hesitated for a moment before finally forcing out the words. I need to borrow another $5,000. His voice cracked slightly. My dad, he passed away today. Earl froze. Samuel had already spent everything he had borrowed before, draining it all on medical bills and basic living expenses in a city as expensive as Pearl. But in the end, it wasn't enough to save his father. And now, he didn't even have enough for the funeral. Earl didn't say a word. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his bank card, and placed it in Samuel's hand. There's $10,000 on this card. Take all of it. If you need more, call me. Samuel's hands trembled as he gripped the card. His eyes glistened with unshed tears. Thank you, Samuel said gratefully. Right now, when everything felt like it was falling apart, Earl was the only person helping him. Earl patted his shoulder. Do you want me to come with you? Samuel shook his head quickly. No. It's already been taken care of. He didn't want Earl to see the tiny, run-down funeral home where his father's body would be laid to rest. He didn't want anyone to witness the bare minimum he could afford. Earl understood and didn't push further. He merely said, "Just let me know if you need anything." Samuel nodded, then turned and walked away. Earl stood there for a moment, watching Samuel's back disappear down the hallway. He had never lived in Norden, where Samuel grew up, but he understood hardship when he saw it. Samuel had made it to college, but his family had scraped together every penny just to send him here, borrowing $10 from their neighbors at a time. The country was growing fast, but for people like Sam, in places like his hometown, there was still a long road ahead before they'd see real change. Earl exhaled, shaking off the weight of that thought. Then, a more immediate problem hit him. He had just given away everything he had. With only $80 left in his pocket, he was officially broke. And Bianca's birthday was today. Earl wandered into the high street near campus, hoping to find something decent for a gift. Walking into a boutique, he scanned the shelves, overwhelmed by the sheer number of choices, until he saw the price tags. Everything was way out of his budget. Eventually, he spotted a knockoff ladies' watch. It looked decent enough, even though it was definitely not high-end, but it cost $120. Earl frowned and approached the store owner. "Hey, can you lower the price a little?" he asked. The owner glanced at him. "How much are you thinking?" $30. Earl tried. The salesgirl gasped dramatically. "What are you, a thief?" "Security. Someone's trying to rob us blind." Earl quickly raised his hands in surrender. "Chill, I'm just broke, okay." Lowering his voice, he added, "Look. It's for a girl that I kinda like, but I only have $80, and I still need to eat." The store owner sighed, looking at Earl like he was some kind of pitiful stray dog. After a brief pause, he waved him off. "Fine, take it for $80. I'll even throw in a gift box." As Earl left, the owner muttered under his breath, shaking his head. "Man, these poor suckers. Starving themselves just to buy gifts for a girl who probably doesn't even care." Earl didn't hear him. Holding the small, neatly wrapped box in his hands, he finally felt a little more at ease. The gift wasn't anything fancy, but at least it was something. Then, his phone rang. It was Wenzel. It turned out that Bianca had invited all of her old classmates in Alnewgo to her birthday party, including Faye. Chapter 138. After talking it over, Earl and Wenzel decided to meet up at the hotel where Bianca's birthday party was being held. They thought it would be a simple birthday celebration, but the moment they arrived, they were stunned by the scene in front of them. The entrance was decorated with bright lights and banners, and one colossal sign read, "Happy Birthday, Bianca." The entire place looked like it was set up for a grand event. Luxury cars lined the driveway, adding to the extravagance. Wenzel let out a low whistle. "I heard some rich guy's been chasing after Bianca. This whole setup looks more like a wedding than a birthday party. Maybe the rumors are true." His tone had a tinge of jealousy. After all, he had known Bianca for years, and just like Faye, she had always been the kind of girl guys like him and his buddies admired from a distance. Now, watching her move into a world that seemed far beyond their reach, he couldn't help but feel a little down. Earl nodded but felt uneasy. Bianca had never been the type who liked flashy displays like this. If anything, she had always kept things simple. But time had a way of changing people. And honestly, what girl didn't like a little glam and attention? Compared to the expensive gifts and high-end crowd inside, the watch he had picked out for her felt insignificant. But still, he had put real thought into it. He could only hope she'd appreciate it. Wenzel sighed. Man, compared to Bianca and Faye, we're really falling behind. Bianca's making a name for herself in college, Faye's about to become a big star, and we're just stuck. He had wanted to keep up with them back in the day, but now it felt impossible. He consoled himself by reminding himself that at least he still had some status. He was a class leader, after all. Earl, on the other hand, wasn't even a dorm representative. Just then, Earl suddenly turned to him and said, "Hey, Wenzel, spot me some cash. I spent all my money on Bianca's gift and don't even have enough for food." Wenzel gave him an exasperated look. "Earl, when did you become this broke?" He teased but still pulled out some cash without hesitation, handing it over. Right at that moment, a familiar voice called out behind them. "Wenzel, Earl." They turned around and saw a tall, elegant figure standing nearby. It was Faye. She wore dark sunglasses, a crisp white blouse, jeans. The outfit was effortlessly stylish, and paired with her heels, and light-washed. She had an air of effortless confidence. Faye had also been invited to the party. She greeted them warmly, but when she took off her sunglasses and got a proper look at Earl, she paused for a brief second. He looked different. Earl looked sharper than usual, dressed in clothes carefully picked out by Belle. He had also been working out, and it showed. His posture, his presence, something about him had changed. A strange feeling stirred inside Faye. It was like she was seeing him for the first time. The three of them headed inside, where the party was already in full swing. The place was packed, not just with Bianca's classmates but also with a crowd of well-dressed young men. Earl figured they were probably friends of Leslie, the guy who had supposedly thrown this over-the-top party for Bianca. The three old friends naturally gravitated toward each other, catching up on life. Wenzel, in particular, couldn't stop asking Faye about her experiences in the music competition, who she'd met, what it was like behind the scenes, and if she had rubbed shoulders with any major celebrities. Eventually, the conversation shifted to the all-star concert happening at her college that night. Chapter 139. As soon as the concert was mentioned, Faye's face lit up with excitement. She told Wenzel that she had managed to score a VIP ticket for Soul's concert through her mentor. Tons of celebrities would be attending, and she might even get a chance to snag an autograph from Soul, the artist she idolized the most. It was obvious from her tone that Faye worshipped Soul. She saw him as a musical genius, someone born for the stage. The idea of surpassing him had never even crossed her mind. Just the thought of getting his autograph or a quick photo with him would be enough to make her happy for weeks. She often imagined what he looked like. Was he young? His voice was incredible, so he had to be handsome, right? In her mind, Soul was tall, charming, and sophisticated, someone with an elite background raised by intellectual parents, basically, the perfect dream guy. Wenzel, on the other hand, envied her VIP access. But given her growing status in the industry, it made sense. She had connections now. Earl, however, was caught off guard. An autograph session. Felix had never mentioned that to him. What would happen when Faye found out that Soul was actually him, a far cry from the rich, well-bred heartthrob she had imagined? Would she be disappointed? Then again, Earl quickly reminded himself that his company was determined to keep Soul's identity under wraps. He would be performing with a helmet on. Even if there was an autograph session or a photo op, Faye wouldn't recognize him. That thought was both a relief and oddly disappointing. As the three of them chatted, the room suddenly grew lively. Bianca had arrived. She walked in, surrounded by a crowd, instantly commanding attention. Even with minimal effort, she looked breathtaking. Her beauty wasn't just about her looks. It was effortless, the kind that made people stop and stare. Among all the women in the room, only Faye could truly match her. Walking beside Bianca was Leslie, the guy rumored to be her boyfriend. A rich, well-connected guy who had gone all out to throw this extravagant party for her. Despite the lavish decorations, it was clear Bianca wasn't entirely comfortable. She leaned in slightly and said to Leslie, in a low voice, "Leslie, I told you, this is too much. It's just a birthday." Before Leslie could respond, a woman standing nearby chimed in with a sugary sweet tone. "Oh, come on, Bianca. You can't blame Leslie for this. He's used to high-class celebrations. This is nothing compared to what he usually does. Honestly, if you hadn't specifically asked him to keep it simple, he was planning to book the entire lakeside hotel and go all out." Earl immediately recognized the voice. It was Mia, the woman who had tried to make his life miserable not too long ago. Mia's words made Bianca unable to reprimand Leslie any further. After all, Leslie had only meant well. At that moment, Bianca spotted Faye, Wenzel, and Earl. Her eyes lit up, and a gentle smile spread across her face. "Faye, Earl, Wenzel. When did you guys get here? The three quickly stood up to greet her, and Mia took Bianca's hand, flashing a charming smile as she said, Bianca, you look absolutely stunning today. Wenzel grinned and said, Happy birthday, Bianca. Leslie also noticed the three of them at this point, and his eyes slightly brightened when he saw Faye's beauty. He also knew Faye, and she was quite popular now. Many of his friends were her fans. He smiled at her and asked, Excuse me, are you Faye? You're becoming quite the star. It's really a pleasure to meet you. A lot of my friends are your fans. If you have the time, could you sign something for me? Chapter 140. Faye agreed with a smile. Just as Leslie was about to call Earl and Wenzel over, Mia suddenly interrupted, pointing at Earl and saying, Oh, he's the campus radio host Bianca personally introduced. The moment Mia said that, Leslie's expression darkened for a split second. It was brief, but Earl caught it right away. Earl let out a dry chuckle. Mia really had a talent for stirring up trouble. Every time she opened her mouth, she managed to make his life harder. But he wasn't intimidated by Leslie's hostility. If Leslie had feelings for Bianca, then he'd just have to deal with the fact that Earl wasn't going to avoid him. Besides, Earl had never been the kind of guy to back down from a little tension. Leslie quickly regained his composure, putting on a friendly smile as he greeted Wenzel, but he completely ignored Earl, acting like he wasn't even there. Bianca was too busy chatting with Faye and didn't notice any of this. With Bianca's arrival, the party officially kicked off. The dining hall was lavishly set, with a feast of high-end dishes. The dinner began after a brief welcome speech from Leslie on Bianca's behalf. Earl, Wenzel, and Faye sat at the same table as Bianca and Leslie. The atmosphere was warm, with guests taking turns wishing Bianca a happy birthday. But Earl stayed mostly quiet. He could feel the subtle tension from Leslie, Mia, and Thomas. Their exclusion of him wasn't overt, but it was obvious enough. As the evening went on, the lights in the restaurant suddenly flickered and dimmed. Moments later, a staff member wheeled in a cart carrying a massive, towering cake. It was a 19-tier masterpiece, marking Bianca's 19th birthday. The cake wasn't just huge, it was stunning. The craftsmanship was impeccable, and the highlight was the top tier, where a delicate sugar sculpture of a princess sat, eerily resembling Bianca herself. Mia wasted no time in making sure everyone knew just how extravagant it was. She said, Bianca, Leslie had this custom made just for you. The sculpting was done by a famous pastry artist from Sorva, someone who's worked for Euphoria royalty. Isn't it breathtaking? Bianca was clearly touched. She smiled warmly at Leslie and thanked him sincerely. Wenzel leaned over to Earl, muttering under his breath, Damn, this guy is really pulling out all the stops for her. Bianca began cutting the cake and handing out slices. It was big enough for everyone to have a piece. Before digging in, the guests joined together in singing Happy Birthday, showering Bianca with well wishes. Then, someone started the tradition of giving presents. One guest placed a wrapped gift on the table, and soon others followed suit, setting their presents in front of Bianca. Wenzel placed his own carefully wrapped gift among them. Earl hesitated for a moment but eventually put his gift up there, too. The box looked decent enough on the outside, at least, as long as no one opened it right away, he might just get away with it. But, of course, fate had other plans. Thomas, ever the opportunist, spoke up with a sly grin. Since we're all here, why don't you open the presents now, Bianca? We'd love to see what everyone got you. Earl's stomach dropped. Of all the things that could go wrong tonight. He was cursing Thomas internally. And hoping Bianca didn't agree with Thomas's suggestion. If she actually went through with it, the students who couldn't afford expensive gifts would be mortified. Thankfully, Bianca frowned slightly and shook her head. I don't think that's a good idea. I'll open them later. She was graceful and thoughtful as always, understanding that not everyone came from privilege.